Hello, a good evening, welcome to Novara Life. My name's Aaron Bastani. No, Michael Walker has not significantly changed appearance, but I am joined by the man himself down the line. Michael, how are we and how was Glasgow? Have you recovered?
Very, very well. I should begin with a big personal thank you to you, Aaron, for covering for me while I went to Glastonbury. I made sure I was on my best behaviour because I knew I couldn't do what I've done a couple of years ago and sort of come back and be ill for a week. Obviously, this is a very important week in terms of the general election, so I can't wait to get back into it.
That's good to hear. I was working so much last week, my daughter doesn't recognise me anymore. But don't worry about that, Michael, as long as you had a nice time. Coming up on tonight's show, we'll discuss Labour's plans to line up billions in corporate investment, the far-right claim victory in the first round of French elections, and a Palestinian doctor tortured in Israel's famous Shin Bet detention facility. Well, he's just spoken out. One of the first things that an incoming Labour government will need to address is the NHS. After all, waiting lists are at record highs. The service is subject to repeated industrial action and disputes over pay, and getting a GP appointment or even a prompt ambulance arriving at an emergency is increasingly difficult. There's no doubt at all that the Tories have made a mess of things, and Labour will have to get a grip incredibly quickly. Central to doing that is the reported plan to oust this man, Richard Meddings. He's the chair of NHS England and was appointed to the position by Sajid Javid in 2022. He's also a board member of Credit Suisse, though quite what that has to do with public healthcare is anyone's guess. Who needs doctors when we've got financiers and bankers? Now, regarding Labour's plans to oust him, The Guardian reports this. Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, is keen to ensure that a new chair of NHS England will help him fulfil his ambitious pledges to ensure the service is meeting targets for key waiting times in A&E and for planned hospital treatment by the time of the next election in 2029. Plans for Meddings to be ousted after the election are an open secret in the NHS. But this is where things get really interesting. So far, so good, right? Labour are being tough. They've promised to sort this out. It's one of their 6 pledges or non-pledges. So they must be serious about it. But wait, because what follows are some rather familiar names. The 3 leading contenders to replace him all have or have had major NHS roles. As Health Secretary in 1999 to 2003, Alan Milburn was an architect of some radical changes made by Labour, including the creation of foundation trusts, which are semi-autonomous from government control. Jackie Smith was a junior health minister in 2001-3 in the early days of her ministerial career before Blair's successor, Gordon Brown, appointed her as Home Secretary, the first woman to occupy the role in 2007. She previously chaired the University Hospitals Birmingham UHB Trust and is now the chair of Barts Health Trust in London, 2 of the NHS's biggest healthcare providers. Lady Morgan, who was Blair's Director of Government and Political Relations between 1997 and 2005, used to chair the Royal Brompton and Harefield Specialist Heart and Lung Trust in London. She is now Deputy Chair of Guy's and St Thomas Trust, which merged with her former trust in 2021. The article goes on to say this. Alan Milburn has maintained a close interest in the health service since Labour lost the 2010 election, including in his role as an advisor to PricewaterhouseCoopers. Jackie Smith is very keen on the role and pushing for it, sources say. However, she was criticised for taking a leave of absence in 2020 from chairing UHB Trust to become a contestant on Strictly Come Dancing, at a time when the NHS was grappling with the COVID pandemic. Morgan became a peer in 2001, chaired the education regulator Ofsted from 2011 to 2014, and has been the Master of Fitzwilliam College, Cambridge, since 2019. All very impressive. Allow me to translate all of that. Sally Morgan hasn't really had a job for 20 years. Alan Milburn works for a private consultancy who would actively benefit from the NHS doing infinity audits and infinity consultations, like conflict of interest there. Meanwhile, Jackie Smith decided to shake maracas and dance the tango on telly rather than share a hospital trust during the worst pandemic the country had seen for a century. Gee, they all sound like great candidates to chair NHS England. I'm sure this isn't about jobs for the boys and one side of the permanent political class, the Labour establishment, doling out goodies. But Aaron, I hear you say, you're being so unfair. These people, they have a track record. They believe in public service. Well, if they believe in public service, explain to me how Smith designated her sister's home in London as her main residence while being an MP, because that allowed her to claim over £116,000 on her family's Redditch home. That was the expenses scandal of 2008-9. Jackie Smith was a very prominent figure in all of that. Later, in an interview published with the Radio Times in 2011, Smith claimed that her expenses had been scrutinised, not because she had effectively made more than £100,000, but because she was a woman, saying, quote, "I know that it was my expenses people looked at first because I was a woman and should have been at home looking after my husband and children." Now, presumably, if she gets this job and anyone scrutinises her again, there'll be misogynists. How dare you? I can see it now, Michael Walker delivering yet another masterclass here on Novara Media. Naughty Michael, don't you dare. After leaving office, she lost her seat in 2010, surprise, surprise. Jackie Smith worked for KPMG, another consultancy. Is this what we can expect from Labour in government? Former MPs and consultants running massive organisations because they're political allies. Michael, I was liking the first bit of this story. You know, this guy was selected by the Tories in 2022. We're going to shake things up. We don't mind turning over the apple cart, upsetting people to get the professionals in. And then I read Alan Milburn and Jackie Smith, and then actually a Labour peer who basically hasn't done anything for 20 years. What's your read on this?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I suppose these are all names. Now that sort of a Labour government is incoming, these are all names that we're going to have to start sort of getting used to, learning a bit more about. Because I think you've put the case against all of these people very well. I suppose I would like to see how their hospital trusts performed when they chaired them, right? Because there's two questions. Are these people, do we back them morally? Do they seem like good, nice, left-wing people? And then there's, did they make their organisations work? If they made their organisations work, I say this when I worked in a school in South London, the head teacher was, I would not have wanted to go for a drink with her. You know, she had some almost sort of, is this a bit too cruel to say? There was some sort of sociopathic elements going on there, but she didn't manage a school very well. So I do think on one hand, Labour getting in, they want the NHS to work really well. So I think it's really important for us to be highlighting these sort of the case against them. Milburn as well, I was looking him up on Wikipedia today. By the time he stood down in Parliament, he had an income of at least £115,000 a year from 5 companies, including Pepsi Cola. So he definitely doesn't seem like, you know, an inspirational, wonderful person. I did speak to Chris Mullin the other day on my podcast, and he was saying, oh, Alan Milburn, yeah, great health secretary. They did get the waiting list down. But this is, we are going to have to sort of, looking at both sides of the ledger, scrutinise these people, work out what their plans are. And I think this is a great sort of introduction to these people. I would also like to see what their record is. Have they actually made things work? Because if they have made things work, that will be sort of, you know, a tick next to their name, as well as these crosses next to their name, which I think you've pointed out very adroitly.
Well, I have to say, going on strictly during the pandemic and bailing out from a hospital trust should probably be a big black mark. Alan Milburn's a bit different. And you're right to say there, Michael, look, the NHS did improve substantially during his tenure as health secretary. That's because we were putting in tens of billions of extra funding. So, you know, is it one or the other? And then Sally Morgan, nobody's heard from this lady for 20 years. And now, you know, she could have a job with NHS England. I suspect it's about who's the most pliable, really, to the health secretary delivering what they want to do. It's basically, you know, nodding, pushing things through and making sure there's no resistance within the organisation. Paying somebody £63,000 a year to do that strikes me as rather strange. Why does a job exist if it's simply a yes person that signs off what the health secretary says? So if the power is actually invested in the health secretary, why does this job exist? I mean, that's a question I would ask for much of the quangocracy in this country, much of which I would like to remove, but that's a separate point. On this point, however, of Labour and its plans for government, this story from Bloomberg also caught my attention. Labour banks on billions of private investments post-election. Billions, here we go. Fascinating details, though, in this Bloomberg report. Let's see what they say next. Keir Starmer is teeing up plans for billions of pounds worth of new private investment in Britain in the first few months of a Labour government. A surge that the opposition party hopes is large enough to help meet its ambitious growth goals and avoid sweeping tax hikes if it wins next week's election. It sounds like we found the magic money tree, right? Free billions, no tax rises. This is the magic money tree. Wow, they managed to find it. Rachel Reeves, who is set to become Britain's first woman Chancellor of the Exchequer on July the 5th, if polls are correct, has been working to spark investors' interests in projects that are central to Labour's manifesto. People familiar with the matter said. Areas of focus include the push into green energy, ramping up house building, and improving public transport on the roads. This is stuff that the government's meant to do, surely. The plan involves creating new financial instruments to stimulate demand from institutional investors, as well as considering how the government can take on some of the risk of private investments in key projects. According to the people who requested anonymity discussing plans for after next week's election, the people declined to detail the specific investments they're expected to announce. Be very scared. Be scared. Be very scared. So they're going to fund this through the creation of new financial instruments. By the way, that's ambiguous sounding. PFI was a financial instrument. And, you know, just the whole tenor, if we can just get that back up, actually, the whole tenor of how this is being written up is quite concerning. From Bloomberg, we've got here lack of detail, anonymity, and the one you really need to watch out for here is how the government can take on some of the risk of private investments in key projects. Translation, you just get the upside, okay? De-risking means that we'll socialize the risk, we'll socialize the downside, we'll privatize the gains, we'll privatize the profits. That's not how capitalism is meant to work. It's the worst of both worlds. The article continues. Amid forecasts for tepid growth this year and next after a short recession in 2023, and hemmed in by tight public finances as well as their own pleasures on taxation, Starmer and Reeves see private finance as an alternative source of funding for national infrastructure projects. The people said their calculation is it's only through working closely with investors that they can stimulate the sort of growth needed to be able to build public services crumbling after more than a decade of underinvestment under the Conservatives. Here we go again. Labour has already said that it will stage a global investment summit in its first 100 days in office. You know, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, popularised that idea of the first 100 days. You know, it's meant to mean loads of big announcements. Labour in their first 100 days have said we'll invite all the organisations who help drive inequality to record highs to deal with record high inequality. The people who help create the problem are part of the solution. It's also been holding meetings with what it calls its British Infrastructure Council, sounds very impressive, to discuss how it can unlock private capital. Now, attendees of those meetings have included representatives from Lloyds Banking Group, Santander, HSBC, Phoenix Group, Fidelity International, M&G, and BlackRock. Here's the thing, none of those companies actually build infrastructure, kind of a problem. Indeed, I suspect all the people at those meetings have perfectly manicured hands, and they're as likely to meet Lord Lucan as encounter a shovel or a power saw. They are money managers. They don't know how to build anything. What they know is boardrooms and moving numbers around on spreadsheets. In other words, the, quote, British Infrastructure Council is there to advise how a Labour government can work with private investors. And on the issue of BlackRock, these guys have $10 trillion under management. $10 trillion. That's around 3 times the size of the UK economy. All of that works for them and their shareholders. All of those assets, those $10 trillion of assets under management worldwide, generates a return for them. They are not Father Christmas. This is about making profits for shareholders, but also, by the way, for the people that work at BlackRock. They earn very good money. But for some reason, many political journalists and politicians in this country think that they are desperate to help Britain and effectively give us free money. They really love Britain, BlackRock. They have $10 trillion under management, but they're going to give us some for free because they like us so much. Like I say, the truth is they are here to make massive profits and increase that spreadsheet of assets from 10 to 12 to 15 to 20. And they can do that precisely because, going back to that other story, the likes of Alan Milburn and Jackie Smith view consultancy, financial services, and politics as essentially one part of the same nexus, with a revolving door between each part. And by the way, this goes beyond just Labour. Of course it does. After all, former Chancellor George Osborne, shortly after leaving Parliament, went to work for, you guessed it, BlackRock. He was earning £650,000 a year while working a gargantuan 4 days a month. Wowee. Do you remember this guy used to slag off benefit scroungers? It's ridiculous. But the same people that employed the literal architect of austerity are now going to help us rebuild Britain, apparently. Believe that, you'll believe anything. More broadly, this does raise significant questions. Is this what we can expect from Labour in government? PFI Mark 2, 3, 4, 5, PFI but woke? This is precisely the kind of story that Novara will be scrutinising while Labour are in office. And by the way, people might say, well, the Tories are out, no need for you guys anymore. I couldn't disagree more. Funding independent media is never more important than when you have people like this in office, because not only do we still have the tapeworm of asset management throughout our economy, throughout the stomach of the British economy, it's everywhere, it's ravenous, it's eating all the nourishment that our Labour puts into the economy. Not only is that still there, but the gap between what the next government says it is and the reality of what it actually will be is enormous. And that's why Novara is relevant, more relevant, like I just said, than ever before, actually. Because yes, we're left-wing. Yes, we want the Tories out. But we aren't mindless cheerleaders for anyone, least of all Labour. If you support that and think it's needed, go to novaramedia.com/support. The link is in the description below. We have a disease in this country when it comes to political journalism, partly because of our electoral system, our partisan system of one side or the other. Labour get in, the right-wing press go crazy, GB News will go crazy, the Tories will get in, the liberal press will go crazy, the Guardian, the Mirror, the BBC. We are left-wing. We're honest, unlike many other people, about our politics. I'm a socialist. I tell you that so you know my potential biases, my perspective when I tell these stories. But also, we're very happy to be critical of absolutely anyone. And that's incredibly rare in the British media landscape. It's confirmed. In the first round of France's parliamentary election, the country has fallen to the far right. Marine Le Pen, the leader of the far-right National Rally, couldn't suppress her joy as her party hoovered up a third of votes in the snap election. Thanking the French for putting National Rally top, Le Pen said her victory showed France's, quote, wish to turn the page on 7 years of the disdainful and corrosive presidency of Emmanuel Macron. And she celebrated what she called the total erasure of Macron's centrist bloc in Parliament. Pretty terrifying stuff. But trailing just 5 percentage points behind Le Pen is the new Popular Front, a broad alliance of French left-wing parties, whose members include Jean-Luc Mélenchon's France Unbowed, as well as the French socialist, communist and ecological parties. Lagging far behind, however, is Macron's Ensemble, or Together, a coalition which gained just 20% of the vote. Now, this is only the first round of the election. Strange, I know, but bear with me. The second round is taking place next Sunday. There are 577 seats up for grabs, meaning the party which gains 289 plus wins an absolute majority. 80 of those seats were won in the first round of the election. The rest will be voted for again next weekend, with only the 2 highest first-round scorers in each seat, along with any other party gaining more than 12.5% of the vote, advancing to the second-round ballot papers. Now, normally, that makes for a 2-party race in most seats in the second round. But with turnout in the first round the highest seen in France for 40 years, as many as 300 seats could see a 3-way race. And the current projections for the seat allocations don't look good. Based on projections from the first round results, National Rally is on course to take 280 seats, just 9 less than an absolute majority. To stave off the threat of a far-right government in France for the first time since the Nazis occupied the country, Mélenchon's left-wing bloc have vowed to pull out of any race in which they've come third, with National Rally first. That leaves their voters free to keep National Rally out by holding their noses and voting for Macron's centrist bloc. The centrists, though, well, they've not agreed to do the same thing, at least not yet, with Macron calling the left-wing bloc extreme. A centrist Prime Minister Gabriel Attal has, however, supported the strategy, saying, quote, "Not one single vote must go to the National Rally." But there are fears that an increasingly polarised electorate won't play along. A recent poll found that while 99% of left-wing voters would support the centrists who block the far right, only 60% of centrists would return the favour. Michael, how bad is this? I mean, on the one hand, you might say it's good that the National Rally don't seem set to have an overall majority, but presumably they can work with relative ease with Les Républicains, who didn't mention, but who are the historic centre-right, who've basically collapsed, but they would help them get over the line to govern.
Yeah, I mean, incredibly worrying, especially if you think, I know while I was at Glastonbury, there was that disastrous debate between Biden and Trump. It seems quite possible that soon we could have Donald Trump in the White House. We could have, obviously, Le Pen won't be standing again for the presidency until 2027, but you could have the far right prime minister. In France, you've got Meloni in Italy. You're looking at a very, very serious far right bloc at that point in time, if you think of 3 G7 countries, which are completely dominated by the far right. So that is pretty terrifying, incredibly significant. I mean, it's hard to see what is sort of the best option for people who want to, obviously you just want the far right to get as few seats as possible. But if they've got 45% of the seats, right, then the best the other half can hope for is this ragtag coalition that's going to be incredibly, incredibly weak, with sort of the far right saying, we're the largest party, we have a right to govern, but they haven't let us. And I can't actually think of a sort of better launching pad for fighting a presidential election in 2027 than that. So I do wonder, I think calling this election was a mistake by Macron. I think it's been absolutely disastrous. But given it has been called, I wonder if there are some people who are hoping that the National Rally do win a majority so they can't sort of find any excuses if they do completely mess up. I know sort of there are some suggestions that they might do a kind of Liz Truss style economic shock. And I suppose the optimistic case would be to say that people will turn against the National Rally in the same way that they have against the Conservatives after Liz Truss did that. But the problem there is that you do have Macron there. So if anything goes wrong for the National Rally, they can just blame Emmanuel Macron. They can say, well, if we'd had complete power, maybe we would have been much more effective. But yeah, incredibly worrying. I remember when sort of people were shocked. I think it was 2002, wasn't it, when the far right got into the second round with Chirac, and just the fact that they got into the second round seemed incredibly shocking. I think they only got between 10 and 20% in the runoff, and now you're looking. It's incredibly likely that we will see them as the largest party and potentially with a majority, as you say.
Yeah, I think that baseline of 20 years ago is really useful, Michael, because Le Pen's party, Rassemblement National, they have the most MEPs. They're about to be the largest party in the French legislature, very close to majority. And it's really interesting what you're saying there, actually, Michael, about not having a majority is actually the best outcome for them. I think that's probably true. And looking pretty strong, looking pretty likely to win the presidency. That is an extraordinary turn of events. And I think perhaps even to make it worse, is you've had the collapse of the mainstream right and the mainstream left over the last 10 years, like I say, Les Républicains, but also the Parti Socialiste, who is simply now just one part of this broader left-wing coalition. The real worry is that the centre of French politics isn't willing to play ball with the left, even now. You have to ask yourself what has to happen for that to change. France's shocking but not unexpected result has led to a flood of international responses. This was Labour leader Keir Starmer speaking at a campaign event.
The lesson I take from that is that we need to address the everyday concerns of so many people in this country who feel disaffected by politics, who feel that on this Thursday, feel either that the country's too broken to be mended, or that they can't trust politicians because of what the Tories have done after the last 14 years. We have to take that head on, and we have to show on Thursday in the United Kingdom and across Europe and the world that only progressives have the answers to the challenges that are facing us in this country and across Europe. We have to make that progressive cause, but we have to, in making that, understand why it is, certainly in the United Kingdom, after 14 years of chaos and failure, that people do feel disaffected with politics, return politics to service, and continue to make that argument that politics is a force for good.
Quite a good, thoughtful response from Keir Starmer there. Meanwhile, Poland's centrist Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who wrestled control of the country from its own right-wing populist party last year, Law and Justice, said this about the rise of the far right across Europe. They love Putin, money and power without control, and they're already in power or are reaching for it in the west or east of Europe. They're joining ranks in the European Parliament. In Poland, we reversed this fatal tide at the very last moment. Let's not waste it. Meanwhile, the leader of the Netherlands far-right party, Geert Wilders, said this. I'll say that again. My French isn't too bad, you know. Félicitations, which means congratulations. And that is in response to a Marine Le Pen tweet for people who are listening to that on the podcast, quand le peuple vote, le peuple gagne. I think you can probably guess what that means. When the people vote, the people win. Which, strangely, is what Keir Starmer's saying. Anyway, then finally, there was this perhaps surprising response from Nigel Farage. He spoke to the website Unheard after a rally for reform in Birmingham over the weekend. They reported this. Nigel Farage has claimed that Marine Le Pen's Rassemblement National will be a disaster if elected in France. Speaking exclusively to Unheard yesterday after a Reform UK rally in Birmingham, reportedly attended by 4,400 people, the party leader said that the RN will be, quote, even worse for the economy than the current lot. His comments were made ahead of results yesterday evening from the first round of France's snap parliamentary elections, which projected a significant victory for the RN. Farage has previously expressed support for Le Pen, writing that while her party's roots were deep in Vichy, i.e. collaborationist Vichy France, and, quote, anti-Semitism was embedded in its DNA, she is a sincere Eurosceptic. He added in the 2017 piece that Le Pen would, quote, make a good leader of France. Michael, Farage and Starmer on the same side on this one. It's a bit of a surprise, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose Keir Starmer's answer was exactly as you'd imagine, you know, a somewhat boilerplate answer from a centre-left leader when it comes to the far right doing well in elections. The Nigel Farage one, I mean, I read the Unheard article you were linking to, and I said, I just feel like I need to know a bit more background here. Well, why has Nigel Farage suddenly decided that he's not against Le Pen? In the same article, he was saying, she should be more like Giorgia Meloni. So Nigel Farage seems to have sort of made the decision that he wants to ape Giorgia Meloni's strategy more than Rassemblement National. I mean, Meloni, people say, has sort of made a fairly concerted effort to sort of say we are a part of the centre-right, even sort of with her sort of neo-fascist origins. My understanding is sort of Marine Le Pen had tried to do that as well. So, yeah, I'm somewhat sort of confounded, I suppose, or dumbfounded by this. But I suppose it's interesting you mentioned the economy. So I suppose much of the sort of commentary on the possibility of the far right coming to power in France has involved this idea that, you know, the European Central Bank wouldn't be willing to bail them out if they sort of went forward with their economic plans. And I suppose what's surprising to me is what I've read, it seems as if the concern with the National Rallies programme from sort of the centrists, the European Central Bank, etc., is that they would cut taxes and increase spending, which is what Liz Truss did, yes. It's also what Nigel Farage has pledged to do in the Reform Manifesto. So, I mean, I suppose he's as well as a politician, he's a host. He kind of just says stuff. So I don't know if there is some sort of deep fracture between sort of the different forces of the far right that I'm just not able to sort of, understand quite yet. I mean, do you have a sense on this one, Aaron? Why sort of Farage is saying Meloni good, Le Pen not?
Well, I quite like, Michael, you say, as a host, he just says stuff. I mean, that is the voice of experience there, isn't it? I think Farage's shtick now, isn't it, is to replace conservatism in this country. And I think he is very much of a mind with Meloni in so much as the pitch is, we are the centre-right. We are what the centre-right was 25 years ago. There's nothing insurgent or radical about us. I mean, there isn't the campaigning, but not in terms of how they're going to govern. And the trust thing is fascinating because, of course, Nigel Farage, on the day of the Kamikaze budget, with Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss at the helm, which was the beginning of the end, of course, for Truss, on the day of that budget, he said it was the best budget, I think, since 1987. So he's changed his tune. I think this, to me, sounds personal. Something's happened. Bear in mind, of course, he was an MEP for a very long time. There would have been, significant lines of communication between Le Pen's people and Farage's people as not only two of the largest parties on the radical right in the European Parliament, but two of the largest parties. So it does sound personal. And like you say, for his comments to have changed so much in the last 7 years is surprising, significant. Israel has released the director of the Al-Shifa hospital, who has been held without charge since November last year. Speaking after his release, Dr. Mohammed Abu Salmiya told reporters that Palestinians in Israeli jails were facing daily abuse. "We were subjected to severe torture," he said, "and my little finger was broken. There was almost daily torture in the Israeli prisons. When prisoners' cells were raided daily, they were severely beaten every day. We say this with full certainty, and we lived through it with great bitterness." Abu Salmiya was one of 55 prisoners released by Israel. Some of those detainees were taken to Al-Aqsa Hospital, where they showed their wounds and the extent of their weight loss. Visibly suffering from skin conditions, the men complained of being subjected to dousing with iced water, forced kneeling for days on end, and electrocution. According to reports, they were fed only one loaf of bread every 48 hours for 2 consecutive months, with some of the men losing 30 kilograms of weight. Abu Salmiya went on to tell reporters that they had, quote, left behind many prisoners, tens of thousands of prisoners living in hardship, experiencing psychological and physical torture that no Palestinian prisoner has experienced since the Nakba in 1948. And he claimed that 2 other doctors from Al-Shifa had died in custody. Abu Salmiya was arrested at Al-Shifa Hospital 8 months ago while Israel raided that hospital. At the time, it was housing over 2,000 displaced Palestinians, as well as patients and medical staff. According to doctors, IDF forces fired on people trying to leave the complex. Israel claimed the hospital was a Hamas command center, a claim staff denied. It's not clear why Israel has released these particular detainees. According to a security official who spoke to Haaretz, the decision to release Abu Salmiya was made by Shin Bet, Israel's domestic security services, following, quote, a re-evaluation of information about him. In other words, they discovered he had nothing to do with Hamas. But Shin Bet have denied this, saying the Israeli prison services released the men due to overcrowding. Whatever the reason, the Israeli political class are furious. Former War Cabinet member Benny Gantz said this: "Whoever took this decision should be fired today. A government that releases those who cooperated with the murders committed in Al-Shifa in October, who helped hide our hostages, made an operational and moral error. It cannot lead this war of existence." He also called on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to, quote, close some government offices to free up space and budget for prisoners. In cabinet WhatsApp messages obtained by, again, Haaretz, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir said this: "It's time to send the Shin Bet chief home. He does whatever he wants, and Gallant, that's Yoav Gallant, totally supports him. They both don't give a damn about the cabinet and the government. Bar runs his own independent policy. He does whatever he wants." Bar is a reference to Shin Bet chief Ronan Bar, and Netanyahu has ordered an inquiry into the prisoner's release. But what he should have ordered is an inquiry into the deaths under interrogation of another Palestinian doctor. Dr. Iyad Rantisi was director of a women's hospital in northern Gaza. On November 11th last year, the 53-year-old was arrested and taken to an Israeli prison for interrogation. Less than a week later, he was declared dead. But while the Israeli government investigated the circumstances of his death, circumstances they were in control of, an Israeli court placed a 6-month gag order on the case, preventing journalists from reporting the details. According to Rantisi's boss, neither he nor Rantisi's family were given any word of the doctor's death. He says Rantisi was arrested at a checkpoint while evacuating to southern Gaza in accordance with IDF orders, and that his body remains in Israeli custody.
And Rantisi's wife has not been able to obtain any information regarding her husband's death. The IDF is currently investigating 40 deaths of Palestinians while in military custody in Gaza. An unknown number have also reportedly died in Israel's prison, where thousands of Palestinians have been detained since the 7th of October. Michael, these are really staggering things to read aloud, frankly. And what's being described at the top of that story, I didn't say it overtly, but it's torture and starvation. Being forced to kneel, not being able to sleep, that is torture. Do you think that these stories getting out, particularly given they're happening to healthcare professionals, will create any kind of political reaction among any of Israel's allies?
I suppose it depends who you're looking at. So when it comes to the Americans, I mean, they're incredibly happy to just say, oh, the doctors were probably Hamas. You know, we've heard American spokespeople say that so often. I mean, in European nations, potentially it would be somewhat different. I wouldn't expect this to particularly change the dial. It was interesting sort of to see that it was Benny Gantz who was sort of saying, the problem here isn't that you had these doctors who were tortured. The problem is that you let them out too soon. Now, he's supposed to be, you know, the big great hope of a moderate Israel is to have Benny Gantz, the moderate, instead of the extremist Netanyahu, become the next prime minister. But it's very clear, you know, that he doesn't give any more of a damn about Palestinian human rights than Netanyahu does. Right? Maybe he'll speak in a sort of more polite tone about a two-state solution, even though he doesn't believe in it. Right? Whereas Netanyahu is happy to just openly say that he doesn't want one. But when it comes to how the Palestinians will be treated, they are, you know, two sides of exactly the same coin. Obviously, here you do have to worry sort of, or wonder, let's say, sort of how far things have to go before there will be an abandonment of Israel. Because, you know, in such a long time, there's been so many people calling for, you know, and so a suspending of arms to Israel is such bare minimum. You know, I think that in a situation like this, we should be sanctioning Israel, frankly, but we're still sending them the very arms they are using to carry out atrocities, and in this case, yeah, as you say, sort of torture. Imprisonment of medical staff on what seems like very, very flimsy pretenses. And we know that they don't have much due process in Israel and Palestine when it comes to the treatment of Palestinians, because they're seen as essentially enemy combatants. And this is, again, you know, to some degree downstream from the words that were being said by Israeli officials in those weeks and months after October the 7th, that we're dealing with human animals. They say, oh, we weren't talking about Palestinians in general, we were just talking about Hamas. Yeah, but every Palestinian who you detain, you claim you've detained because they're Hamas. So that does mean, you know, without evidence, frankly, but that does mean that you are giving your prison guards or whoever outright permission and encouragement to treat people this way.
It really does make you wonder. Like you say, the bare minimum should be the end of arms sales. And I've said this a number of times, the fact that nothing significant happened in the UK after 3 UK nationals were killed. And we had Lord Cameron, the foreign secretary of this country, telling the Israelis to investigate themselves. And my goodness, the only country that actually lost somebody that day and said, we will have our own independent investigation was the Poles. Good for them. The US and the UK didn't. That to me spoke volumes. But, you know, when you've got healthcare professionals being killed and their body is still being kept by the party which has killed them, and their family isn't told that the person has been killed, it's a level of savagery, actually, which, you know, people like to talk about Israel as quite a member of the West, a liberal democracy. Of course, this is all complete nonsense. It's an apartheid state. It's presently embarking on ethnic cleansing, of course. But there are just some, I don't know, emotional cues you'd think this would hit. You know, the idea of a civilian doctor being killed in this fashion, the idea of civilian doctors being tortured in a very classical way. You know, when this was happening in Cuba with Guantanamo, the exact same techniques of kneeling down for long periods of time, sleep deprivation, noise, the exact same stuff that's now coming out with regards to the Israeli penitentiary system and its holding of thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of Palestinians. It's really strange for me, the fact that you can have journalists overtly criticizing Guantanamo, which they did, but actually there's very little beyond the liberal left, and even then it's intermittent, coming out from this country to Israel's treatment of these people. I find it absolutely staggering. You know, people repeatedly, they come up to me, Michael, in the street, and they praise you to the high hills because, of course, you're the host, you're the big dog on this show 3 days a week. And they say, wow, Novara Media is one of a very small group of people who covered this story honestly, effectively. I am amazed, frankly. I mean, there's some some great original journalism and news gathering by CNN and the BBC in particular, others too, but they've been fantastic. Frankly, many organisations, their original news gathering has sometimes been phenomenal, Sky as well. But the general tone of political comment and coverage feels to me miles off. Miles off. I don't think any sensible person, right, left or centre, thinks this is okay, and yet many of them give it a free pass. The chances of Donald Trump being the next president of the United States have always been somewhere between decent and pretty high. A lot of people are saying it. They got even stronger after last week's first presidential debate. What with Joe Biden declaring war on Medicare, I believe it was. Nobody knows for certain. In any case, the Supreme Court has just raised Trump's chances even further. That is after ruling that Trump has, quote, absolute immunity from prosecution for some actions whilst president in the federal election case being brought against him. In case you've forgotten, Donald Trump is facing criminal charges on several counts over allegations that he conspired to subvert the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. But according to the Supreme Court, official actions committed by Trump that belong to, quote, the outer perimeter of his office as president, well, they're immune from prosecution. Examples include pressuring Vice President Mike Pence on January 6th and threatening to fire the acting Attorney General over the Georgia vote. Unofficial actions, however, could still be found to be criminal. Now, what counts as an official action has been kicked down the road, with the Supreme Court ordering a lower court to decide on a case-by-case basis which actions listed in the court case count as, quote, official. That means it's very unlikely Trump will face trial before the November election, if at all. And he seems pretty pleased about it, saying this: big win for our Constitution and democracy. Proud to be an American. As some of the justices on the Supreme Court, though, are not so sure it's a win for democracy. The ruling split the court along political lines, with the 6 conservative judges voting in favour of Trump's partial immunity and 3 liberal judges voting against. This is a remarkable passage. In her dissenting opinion, Sonia Sotomayor said this: the relationship between the president and the people he serves has shifted irrevocably. In every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. The president of the United States is the most powerful person in the country and possibly the world. When he uses his official powers in any way under the majority's reasoning, he now will be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? Immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power? Immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon? Immune, 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 immune. Michael, that is, like I said, an extraordinary statement from Sonia Sotomayor. She is a liberal justice. She was given that position, I believe, under Barack Obama. Is it true? Because, people like to be hyperbolic about these things. The judgment itself seems awful and is congruent with what she's saying there. But some of the powers invested in George W. Bush by the Patriot Act and so on, they also feel akin to the powers you would give a king, somebody above the rule of law. So is this really that new?
Well, I suppose the difference would be, the American president has phenomenal power to take out, the most people in the world, let's say, the way they took out Qasem Soleimani, right? This is a senior foreign official. Donald Trump decides he should be taken out, and he's assassinated on in an airfield, I think, wasn't he? I think he was visiting Iraq at the time. And so if you're looking at sort of in terms of the international order, then the president can pretty much do whatever they want up to the highest level, right? When presidents get brought down, it doesn't tend to be because they all helped organize a coup somewhere or because they killed a foreign dignitary. Normally, when it sort of impinges on domestic politics. And so that's the difference here, really. That's what Donald Trump has changed, whereby it used to be incredibly normal for American presidents to do whatever the hell they wanted outside of the United States. Now he's sort of trying to bring that same attitude of impunity to within the United States. Now, obviously, he's not the first person to have sort of gone over and above the rule of law when it comes to American domestic politics. But I think he probably is one of the first people to sort of do it so openly, so proudly, in such a way that I suppose does feel especially challenging and threatening to the system itself. Because, at least with J. Edgar Hoover or whatever, now obviously what he did was absolutely terrible, but he had to do it in secret. And the idea was that sort of if a really, really intelligent journalist had sort of uncovered it all, then maybe it would have, to some degree, sort of those actions would have been militated against, or there would have been some sort of correction. With Donald Trump, I mean, it doesn't matter if anyone sort of openly says what's happening, because he can just say, yeah, that's fine. I'm not going to do anything about it. My people don't care. So, the future of the Republic is under threat, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not so sure. I am about that final point. But what sticks in my mind, Michael, is from 2017, there was somebody who, I think he was in Yemen at the time, Anwar al-Awlaki. He was killed in a drone strike, which was obviously, it was vetted, it was okayed by Trump. He was a US national. And what I found sickening at the time was that he was killed alongside his 8-year-old daughter, who was also a US national. So an 8-year-old girl, an American citizen, being drone striked by US forces. And not only was that legal, nobody saw a problem with it. And at the time, I remember seeing that and thinking, really? Nobody has a problem with the USAF drone striking an 8-year-old American national? I mean, where's the line here? When does that not become okay? And I do feel like there's been a drift to where it's now going. There's been that drift for a very long time. Actually, frankly, since the Patriot Act and like I say, the immediate response to 9/11. And I think liberal America is kidding itself if it doesn't think that. I mean, obviously many American liberals think that, but a hell of a lot of them don't. And a lot of sort of centrist Republicans were cheerleading that stuff. The never Trump people. They had no problem with drone striking an 8-year-old girl, including the fact that she was an American national. But they have a problem now. Makes you think. Michael, before we go, you weren't around last week, as I've repeatedly said I had to cover for you. That's why I'm suffering from my own cognitive decline. I didn't rest well over the weekend, and I was thinking about this week's election, which will be so much fun to cover. But I would really love to get your thoughts on some of the debates. What did you think of that debate between Trump and Joe Biden, the first presidential debate? Was it as bad as everyone was saying?
No, I have to admit, I haven't watched the full debate because it happened while I was at Glastonbury, but I've seen sort of the clips on social media and lots of the commentary around it. And I mean, I'm not sure what I can add because it was just, so terrifying, really. People are really going to struggle to vote for that guy. And I suppose obviously the standout line was Donald Trump sort of saying, I don't think he knows what he just said. Well, I don't know what he just said, and I don't think he does either. Very good line. I've seen today, because obviously there was a period where sort of immediately afterwards, the liberal establishment seemed to be seriously talking about, we're going to have to replace this guy. Now I'm reading that there's this big sort of PR drive by the people around Biden to blame his advisors. They said he was over-prepared. Now, if you think that anyone is going to have watched that debate and think, what's wrong here? That guy, he's over-prepared, right? No one is going to have seen that debate, seen the clips that I've seen, and say, yeah, the problem here is he was over-prepared, or he was wearing too much makeup, I think was another reason what they thought had gone wrong. It's clearly, this guy doesn't have the mental faculties to sort of perform well in a debate. I mean, you can't train someone to be better at that than they are. And it's, that shouldn't be an offensive thing to say. I imagine when I'm 81, I would struggle to sort of take part in a debate like that. He's obviously going to be 86 or 85, 86 if he sort of by the end of his presidency, if he is re-elected. And so, this seems to be another sort of signal of an empire in decline. Like everyone's saying, the only person who can get rid of this guy is himself. The only person who can decide he's not going to stand is himself. It's all basically down to what Jill Biden and his son think he should do. Which is just like, what? That's really crazy. Like, that's really effed up. If the American Republic sort of collapses because they couldn't persuade a guy who was clearly too old for the job to stand down, like, is there not someone else who can intervene? People also say, I keep reading this line that sort of, there's a problem that Kamala Harris is the vice president and she's not very popular, because it would be much sort of simpler if Biden could just be replaced by his vice president. They say that would be really divisive in America. It's like, really? I feel like a lot of these lines are kind of made up in sort of media narratives, and then they just get repeated as if they're fact. Is there really a huge section of American society who's really invested in Kamala Harris being the next president? I know, the argument is a sort of identity politics one, that she's, the first female person of color in that VP role, and if she's passed up to be the presidential candidate, that will cause disquiet. But I mean, America is a country full of adults. Right? I think if you explain, yes, we would have loved her to have been in the role, but she's not that popular, we're going to go for someone who's popular and can beat Donald Trump. I think most Americans just go, yeah, that reads okay. That makes sense. Let's do that instead of having this ridiculous contest where we're putting the guy who wants complete immunity to kill his political rivals. I mean, obviously that's the implication of Sandra Sotomayor. Donald Trump hasn't necessarily said he would do that, versus someone who can't finish a sentence without getting confused. It seems lots of the problems that have been created to sort of suggest this is irresolvable seem to involve treating Americans like children, when it's really that the Democratic elite cannot get its act together.
I think that's right. A few quite nasty comments. One is, Aaron, what's wrong with your glasses? There's nothing wrong with them. Some steam comes, it goes. But one comment I do have to agree with Michael is, what on earth is going on with your sound? He is not recording from his bathroom. It's just he turned down the shower curtain. Normally it absorbs a lot of it. No, I'm just kidding. It's a new mic, isn't it, Michael? It's not your usual mic.
It's actually my old mic. Yeah, my new mic is at my partner's house. He was doing an interview on Six Music with Lauren Laverne, and then I thought it was here, but we hadn't sorted it out. I'm going to get everything in order as we get closer to the general election.
You're lucky I'm not a Tory, Michael. Well, I'm not me. I'm not your line manager. You're lucky Gary's not a Tory. God. I was going to use that as an opportunity to say, give Novara Media more money, but we already have the kit. It's just Michael didn't bring it. You should have lied.
There is some truth to that. There is some.
You should have lied. You should have lied. Quickly, how was Glastonbury, Michael? What was the vibe politically when you were remotely coherent?
I stayed very coherent because I knew I didn't want to be sick for the election. No, it was very nice. It's very lovely to meet some Novara supporters at our talk. And no, it was really nice. I saw Romy at the end. She's like a young queer electronic music DJ. The thing with Glastonbury is I think you should go to the people who are really happy to be there. Because if you're watching someone who's like, really, this means a lot to me to be here. I've wanted to be here my whole life. This is amazing. And you'll have a great time. Like, I didn't see Dua Lipa from the clips. She looked like she was like that. Saw SZA on the Sunday, and she's a very talented musician, but I don't think she really knew where she was. Not in a Joe Biden style way, just in a sort of, if you're an American superstar, then being at Glastonbury is just some festival on your European tour, isn't it? So you want to see people who really care about being there.
I get it. I was there last year. I missed Elton. Our good friend Elton, who, by the way, has just come out for Labour. Rather strange. Anyway, I'll just say it one more time. If you want to get Michael a new mic, even though he's got one, let's get him another one. Go to novaramedia.com/support. Links in the description. We might need to get 3 or 4 with Michael, just because we can't have that sound again. Michael, thanks for joining me this evening. You're not too sunburned, which is a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope your daughter starts to recognise you again.
Yes, I hope so too. Probably after Thursday. And thanks to everyone watching this evening. Come back tomorrow night for another live stream from 6 p.m. For now, you've been watching Novara Media. Good night.